Hi, I'm Heather Johnson with the Ayurveda Life School. Let's talk a little bit about Pitta Dosha. Pitta Dosha, or Pitta constitution, is the fire element. Has a little bit of water in there, but it's mostly fire. And it creates a lot of heat within our bodies and our minds. This heat is very important. Pitta governs digestion of our food and of our sensory impulses. Everything that comes in through the senses, Pitta has to digest it, has to process it, and make sense of all of it. So Pitta is really important. And on a cellular level, it actually deals with cellular metabolism, cellular digestion. So when we don't have enough Pitta fire, we're not able to metabolize, break down foods, and bring them into the body. And so it's important that we have adequate Pitta fire. But sometimes it can get a little bit out of control. And that's where we get some of the issues that come along with Pitta Dosha. So let's look at Pitta Dosha and kind of break it down. What it would look like with you physically, what it looks like for you functionally, and also how it affects your emotions and the way you interact with other people. So when we look at someone structurally who has Pitta, they tend to be more of a moderate build. That means they're not super thin. They're also not really heavy. They're kind of somewhere in the middle. They're able to build muscle structure really well. So our Pitta doshas are people that when they lift weights, they get good definition pretty quickly. You can see the different muscles in their bodies. These would be like your physique body competitions. So people who go to those and they're in this bikini contest, they tend to be more of a Pitta constitution in their frame. When we look at their face, a Pitta face is more angular. I like to think of that square shape. They kind of have that square jawline. Think of Tom Cruise or Kate Hudson. They have a very square jawline. So that's more of a Pitta face shape. You look for all those angles. And then we're looking at the eyes of a Pitta. They're gonna have a lot more intensity. They can be deep set, but they're very piercing. If you think of how fire can kind of cut through things, that's what it feels like when a Pitta is got all their attention focused on you. They're gonna cut through all of it, feel like they can kind of like see to you on the inside. So that's Pitta. The nose will be a little more moderate. So that means that the bridge of the nose is a good width and length for the face. It doesn't really stand out. And the tip of the nose isn't going to be large or small. It's somewhere right in the middle. Pitta lips are moderate as well. You're noticing that Pittas tend to be that middle ground between Vatas and Kappas. A Pitta neck is going to be moderate. So if you look at the width and the length, it's going to just be moderate, very well proportioned for their face. When we get into the hands, Pitta fingers are going to be a more average, moderate length. The hand shape will be square, and there won't be too much excess flesh on it. So if you look at your own hands, you can just identify if the palm is a little bit square or is it more rectangular and decide from that. So that's how we look at the structure of the body. Now, when we get into the function of Pitta, Pitta, as I said, is in charge of digestion, metabolizing the food. So they tend to have a good appetite because Pittas are burning up that food as quickly as they can get it in. These are your friends that get pretty hangry if they haven't had lunch yet and it's 1 o'clock and they start looking at the clock and they're like, it's time for food, it's time for food. And they get a little grumpy and distracted. So if you work with someone who is a Pitta, or if you suspect they might have a little extra fire in them, make sure they're well fed before you bring up that stressful work conversation. Pitta doshas also tend towards really good sleep. They are our best, most consistent sleepers of the 3 doshas because they don't sleep too heavy like a Kapha, and they also don't sleep light like a Vata. They tend to be able to sleep through just common noises. The only thing that will keep them up is they're really intent on work. They have a project they've been really thinking about and they're strategizing. They're planning. They have a long list of to-dos. That can keep them up thinking about work. But they don't tend to wake up in the night worried or anxious. They might wake up to plan something, but they tend to sleep pretty well until that alarm clock rings in the morning. Now, their elimination tends to be pretty regular. So 1 to 2 times a day is pretty normal. They don't usually get constipated very often. And if they do, they know that Vatas kind of come in there with that dryness and cause some problems. So as a Pitta, if you really don't notice your elimination because it's so consistent, then consider yourself blessed because that's a really nice attribute to have. But if you get out of balance, you will notice you tend towards loose stool, diarrhea, kind of hot burning on elimination. So you kind of want to watch that. Some common things that we see too with Pitta is heartburn. So if you're super intense, you're giving yourself stomach ulcers, you're having heartburn coming up, anything that has to do with heat comes from Pitta. So when you get embarrassed and your face gets red, that's Pitta Dosha. If you get really angry and intense, that's the fire rising inside, that's Pitta Dosha. As we look at the emotions of Pitta, as I mentioned, anger tends to be kind of the biggest problem for Pitta, just because there's a lot of heat. And when they get fired up or upset or stressed, that heat starts to rise and it tends to kind of erupt like a volcano. So we want to be really mindful if we are Pitta Dosha or have a lot of Pitta in our constitution, that we don't erupt on the people that are around us, right? We need to create a little bit of compassion, a little bit of understanding that there is no such thing as perfect. And so when we hold everyone to this standard of perfection, including ourselves, no one can live up to it. So just be really careful about that as a Pitta so that you keep all of your friendships and connections really strong and don't alienate people. Emotions that are really common in Pittas as well are things like being very disciplined, very focused. They love linear thinking. They love to stay organized. They can become very obsessed with work and they want to get to that end goal. So we always want to take time to smell the roses, which rose is a very good Pitta reducing scent. And we want to take time on the way to enjoy it, to have some beauty in the journey. So that's kind of our one caveat with Pittas. They get a little bit intense in that respect. So if you're seeing a lot of yourself within this description, then you know you have a lot of Pitta fire in your constitution. We also can have imbalances in Pitta, which we'll talk about in other videos, but we're just working on identifying, am I Pitta Dosha? Do I have some fire and heat in me? Remembering that everyone has all three doshas, but you tend to have one that you kind of lead with. So start to analyze yourself, look at yourself a little more deeply, take some mindful moments and determine whether you have a lot of Pitta or not, and then you'll know better how to keep yourself balanced in the future. We'll talk to you on another video. Have a beautiful day. Namaste.